A creepy incident that occurred in the house of a man after returning from work at a job site in another province. At that time, he inadvertently said something, causing evil spirits to haunt his home, in a tale known as Buddy. This story revolves around Shane, a person who is extremely afraid of ghosts. He's so scared that he can't even stand hearing ghost stories. Whenever friends or colleagues bring up the topic of ghosts, he tends to curse, or if someone unfamiliar talks about ghosts, he tries to escape. Shane lives in a 2-story house in Bangkok with his wife and himself, but due to his contracting job, he rarely stays at home and often has projects in different provinces. Until one time, Shane had a project to work on in a province in the northeastern region of Thailand. He had to work there for a month. At that time, he drove his private van to pick up the team and prepare the necessary equipment. This project was quite large, requiring almost 30 people in the team. Other team members would bring pickup trucks and follow behind. Then he arrived at the work site. Shane worked continuously until the last day when he had to travel back. He asked the team to help load the equipment onto the van. At that time, there were about 8 empty seats left in the van. He shouted to the other team members, "Hey, everyone, whoever wants to go home with me, come up now. Come up to the van now. Whoever wants to go home, hurry up and get on the van." He shouted about 2 or 3 times because there were quite a few workers, and gradually some workers started getting on the van until it was full. Shane drove the van out of the work site around 5 p.m. and arrived at the accommodation for the workers around 10 p.m. He parked the van, let everyone off, and unloaded all the equipment from the van. Then, he personally inspected the van to see if any tires were flat after the long journey. While he was inspecting the van, one of the workers walked up to him and said, "Hey, bro, tonight, it's 2 at a time, huh?" Shane was confused about what he meant. The worker explained, "Don't be embarrassed, bro. Our boy knows. After working hard all month, let loose a bit, right? Full throttle at the hotel, bro." When Shane heard this, he started feeling strange about the worker's words and replied, "Why would I go to a hotel? My wife is waiting at home. I'm heading back home." But the worker just smiled, patted him on the back and said, "Come on, bro, don't be shy. Have a good time, all right? I gotta go now." Then he walked back to the dormitory. Shane began to wonder why the worker was talking so strangely, but he didn't pay much attention, thinking the worker was just joking around. So he drove back home. At Shane's house, there's a large remote-controlled gate, and both Shane and his wife have keys to the gate and the house. Shane's wife works in customer service, and her work hours are often unpredictable. Sometimes she finishes early, sometimes late, even until 1 or 2 in the morning. Sometimes she finishes at midnight and goes straight to a wedding during that time. Then, she has a regular taxi driver who is actually her uncle to pick her up. Since Shane often has to travel to different provinces for work, he relies on her uncle to help out. When Shane arrived home, he noticed that the house lights were off. He thought his wife might have finished work late today, but it was okay because it was normal. Shane picked up the remote to open the gate, drove the van into the parking lot, and didn't turn off the engine immediately since he had traveled a long distance and wanted to warm it up first. While he was checking the back seat for any forgotten items, getting ready to enter the house, he was surprised to see that the lights were on now. He was shocked because they were off just a moment ago. However, he tried to rationalize that maybe he missed something earlier. If the lights were on, it meant his wife must have come back. Shane hurriedly walked into the house, but before he could hear the sound of the bedroom door closing, he thought, "Why didn't my wife come to greet me? We haven't seen each other for a month." So, He decided to go upstairs and knocked on the bedroom door. He spoke to his wife inside. "Hey, you're back? When did you come back? I didn't see you at all." Then he heard his wife's voice from inside the room. "Yes, I'm back, dear. I came in when I saw you checking the van. I came inside first because I had a stomachache. I'm gonna take a shower first. Have you eaten anything yet? I'll be down soon. Wait for me downstairs." Shane replied, "Okay, I'll wait for you downstairs." Then he walked down the stairs to wait for his wife. However, as his foot touched the bottom step, he was shocked to see his wife walking towards the front door from inside the house, carrying groceries to prepare a meal. He stood there in shock and asked her with a trembling voice, You just arrived?" Shane's wife looked at him puzzled and said, "Hey, I just got back. That's why the taxi is about to leave." He turned to look at the front of the house and indeed saw a taxi about to drive off. She turned back to him and asked, "What's wrong? Why are you surprised?" Then Shane asked, "Who was upstairs just now?" His wife started to get annoyed and thought he was joking. "Don't play around now," she said. "What's wrong with you? Who was upstairs just now?" Shane replied, "I'm not joking. I talked to you earlier. When I knocked on the door, you said you were going to take a shower first and then come down to make food. I'm just going downstairs to wait for you." Then his wife complained, "I've been working so hard all day. No need to say anything. Let's just eat noodles first. I brought some from the market earlier." She grumbled as she walked into the kitchen. Shane followed her slowly, still looking puzzled and suspicious. "I wasn't joking. Earlier I talked to you for real. When I knocked on the door, you said you were going to take a shower and then come down to make food for me," Shane said. His wife looked like she didn't believe him. Shane sat down at the table and started eating noodles, but he was still puzzled. He reached out to touch his wife. "Is it really you?" he asked, his arms trembling. His wife started to get angry. "You've been working for less than a month, and you can't even remember your own wife?" Seeing his wife's mood worsening, he quickly said, "Okay, it's fine. Maybe I've been working too much. But today, I'll go upstairs with you." Normally, whenever Shane returns home, he eats dinner and then goes upstairs to shower and sleep before his wife. But now he's starting to get scared, so he tries to make excuses. After finishing dinner, they watch TV together while waiting to go upstairs. His wife finds Shane acting strange today and wonders what's going on. But as they finish washing the dishes, Shane's wife calls him upstairs. Shane hesitates, fearing what might happen. When his wife opens the door to the bedroom, they find it empty. Shane quickly opens the bathroom door and checks around the room, but no one's there. His wife asks what's going on, and Shane simply says there's nothing. Now Shane is afraid his wife might get upset. He starts to wonder if they talked to someone else, but then he remembers the voice was definitely his wife's. As they both finish their business and start to go to bed, Shane suddenly wakes up again, feeling the urge to urinate. He rushes to the bathroom, then returns to bed to sleep. While opening the bathroom door, he hears voices coming from the front of the room. Shane is startled and scared, thinking it might be a ghost or a thief. He slowly moves towards the door to listen to the conversation. Shane cautiously walks towards the front door, listening carefully and placing his ear as close as possible to the door. He hears the voices of two women talking. "This house is so beautiful. The location is also great," says one. The other replies, "Yeah, it's true. The house looks nice and the atmosphere is great." When Shane hears this, He is shocked because the voices of the two women are his wife's. It's impossible because his wife is in bed. At that moment, Shane realizes that the two women outside seem to know he's eavesdropping. She speaks up, asking, "Shane, are you eavesdropping on your wife?" Upon hearing this, Shane quickly ran and jumped into bed to find his wife. He shook her arm until she started to wake up groggily. She woke up and asked, "What's wrong again?" He replied, "There's a ghost. A ghost is in front of the room. Let's go see." The voice sounded just like you. Shane's wife was startled and asked, "How is that possible?" She got up and went to the door, immediately opening it. She looked left and right but found nothing. While Shane sat trembling on the bed, she turned back to tell him, "Hey, I don't see anyone at all." But just as Shane's wife turned back to him, he saw the faces of two more of his wives appearing from the side of the door, smiling at him. Now Shane was terrified, but he was also worried about his wife. He got up to pull his wife back onto the bed and then quickly closed the door, the noise echoing loudly. He hugged his wife tightly, shaking uncontrollably. Shane's wife began to realize that something really bad must have happened because she knew how afraid he was of ghosts, and his current condition couldn't be fake. That night, Shane's wife sat with him, hugging him until they fell asleep until the early morning. When Shane's wife woke up, he was still shaking. She told him, "I'll go downstairs to prepare food for Make Merit and give alms to monks. You go take a shower and get ready. We'll do it together." When it was time, the monk stood in front of the house while Shane and his wife were preparing the almsgiving. As they were offering the alms, the monk glanced at Shane's wife's face, then at Shane's, noticing their strange expressions, alternating with glances inside the house. The monk looked like this for a couple of rounds until Shane's wife had to ask, "Is there something?" But the monk didn't respond to anything. After offering the alms and the monk giving blessings, he turned to Shane and said, "They're following you. You're the one who calls them." When Shane heard this, he turned pale. "Is it true?" he asked. "What should we do if it's like this?" The monk replied, "Later in the afternoon, come and see me at the temple, all right?" When Shane and his wife arrived at the temple, Shane began to narrate the entire event they had encountered to the monk and bring the monk back home along with the equipment for his religious ceremonies. Then, the monk performed a ritual and sprinkled holy water around the house. When they reached the bedroom door, the monk stopped and spoke to the air. "You can't stay here. This is not your place, and the people in this house are very scared. I ask for you to return to your place." After the monk finished speaking, he said, "It should be better now, but if there's anything, we'll deal with it later." Then the monk headed back to the temple. That day, Shane's wife suggested going to the beach together. She said, "Since we encountered so much last night, it would be better if we go to the sea. We can take my parents with us." Shane agreed. Both Shane and his wife's family traveled to the sea and stayed there for one night. Everything seemed to go smoothly, and nothing unusual happened until the second day when they headed back home. On the way, they stopped by various temples to make merit and also bought souvenirs. When they finally arrived at his wife's parents' house, it was almost 5 p.m., and Shane's wife's parents suggested staying overnight since it was already late. They decided to return home the next day. That night, they slept at wife's parents' house until morning, then hurried back home to get ready for work. At that point, both Shane and his wife had forgotten about the events of the previous day. Everything seemed to return to normal. However, in the end, things didn't turn out as they expected. On that day, Shane finished work and returned home almost at 3 a.m. He parked the car in front of the house as usual. Looking inside, he noticed that the lights were on. He thought his wife must have returned. As he entered, he found his wife preparing food in the kitchen. "Hey Shane, you're back? Go take a shower first. I'll prepare some noodles downstairs for us to eat." Shane headed upstairs to take a shower. As he twisted the doorknob and pushed the door, he saw that the bedroom light was on. Looking at the makeup table, he was shocked to see his wife sitting there, wearing a white nightgown. "Who's that?" Shane exclaimed, looking at the reflection in the mirror, realizing it was indeed his wife. He stood there, holding the doorknob, trying to comprehend who was downstairs, who his real wife was, and who or what was in the bedroom. Meanwhile, his wife sitting in the room spoke up. "Hey Shane, you're back? Go take a shower first. I'll go downstairs and prepare the food for us." Still in shock, Shane replied, "Wait a minute. It's not what it seems. Downstairs." His words trailed off as he struggled to explain. His wife noticed his distress and asked, "Did you see something else again? I told you not to overwork. There's no one downstairs. It's just the two of us at home. I finished work early today and just finished showering before coming up. You go take a shower." But Shane insisted, "No, it's not like that. Downstairs. Just now." Before Shane could finish speaking, he heard footsteps coming up the stairs from downstairs. Shane felt something was wrong. Although he didn't make the right decision, he was more afraid of whoever was downstairs. So he decided to enter the room and lock the door. At that moment, the person downstairs reached the front door and began knocking loudly, calling out, "Shane, Shane, open the door." Shane's wife outside tried twisting the doorknob and shaking the door, asking, "Why did you lock the door? Open it. You said you were going to take a shower. Why did you lock the door?" Inside, Shane tried to point and signal to his wife in the room to look outside. "Can you hear that?" he asked. But his wife sitting in the room looked puzzled, as if she hadn't heard anything. Shane began to feel confused and bewildered. How could she not hear such loud knocking? He tried to gesture toward the door, realizing something. Perhaps the person inside wasn't real. How could the knocking be so loud otherwise? The person outside must be his real wife coming to help him. Couldn't be the person inside. Deciding to open the door, he saw his wife in work clothes standing there. Shane quickly grabbed her arm and pointed inside to the room where his other wife was standing in her nightgown. "Help! Can't you see? There's a ghost!" Shane exclaimed, but his wife replied, "Where? I don't see anyone. There's no one inside. What do you see?" Shane slowly turned to look at her face. He was completely baffled, but he still pointed ahead. "There, the white dress." She responded, "Again, you're seeing things. I told you not to work too much. There's nothing downstairs. Now you see something strange again, right?" Shane began to panic, filled with questions, scared of ghosts, but more afraid of not knowing who was who. While he was still confused, his phone rang loudly, interrupting the tense moment. He quickly picked it up to check. It turned out that the incoming call was from Shane's wife, and Shane was so shocked that he almost had a panic attack. He tried to steady himself and answered the call, confirming that it was indeed his real wife. She called to say that she had just finished work and was at the market, asking if he wanted rice or noodles to buy for him. Shane was trembling at hearing this, and his phone almost slipped from his hand. He slowly backed away from the two women in front of him until he leaned against the staircase railing. At that moment, one of the women in front of him spoke up, asking, "Who called? And why did you drop your phone?" Shane couldn't help but wonder what was happening. Was no one seeing each other? Before both of them started approaching Shane, getting closer and closer. Then they asked him, "What are you going to do?" At that moment, the faces of both women, who were originally Shane's wives, began to pale. Their black eyes disappeared, leaving only white eyeballs and dangling from the eye sockets. Then, they both turned to Shane and said, "This is better. Who will you choose between the two of us and your wife? Do you even know which one is your wife?" Now Shane had no way to go, as the two of them were blocking the exit. But he couldn't bear it anymore. Somehow he had to get out of there. Shane decided to close his eyes and run sideways to the balcony at the back of the bedroom, then immediately jumped down from the second floor. Fortunately, there was still grass below, but he still landed heavily, letting out a loud groan that echoed through the house. At that moment, Shane's wife began to feel something strange because Shane's voice disappeared out of the blue. She quickly took a taxi back home. Upon arriving, she saw Shane lying on the lawn, so she rushed over to him. She tried to ask Shane what was wrong, but he couldn't say anything, just pointing slowly upwards. She followed his gaze, and what she saw shocked her to the core. She saw the figure of a woman who looked exactly like her, standing and staring at her from the balcony. She screamed until she passed out. At that moment, neighbors who heard rushed in to help and called an ambulance. But both Shane and his wife were perfectly fine. Both of them stayed in the hospital for 15 days to recuperate, as this incident had almost driven them both to madness. The events they had encountered were extremely terrifying, something they had never experienced before, leaving them both physically and mentally drained. After being discharged from the hospital, they immediately went to the temple to see the monk. They recounted the entire story to him once again, and the monk said that if it was that serious, he would handle it himself. Then the monk performed another ritual at their home and saying that Shane needed to take them back to where Shane had called them. Shane quickly agreed. While Shane drove a van with his wife and the monk, he knew for sure that the spirits were accompanying them because when he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw the two female spirits sitting in the back seat behind the monk. But what was even more terrifying was that they had no faces, just blank, featureless visages without eyes, noses, or mouths. Shane tried to muster the courage to continue driving until they reached the original spot. Then the monk performed the rituals until they were completed. He turned to everyone and said, "Everything's done." Before they set off on their journey back, both Shane and his wife felt inexplicably relieved. As they looked into the rearview mirror on the way back, they saw the spirits standing at the spot where they had been dropped off, and after that, nothing strange ever happened at Shane's house again.